Motivation is not what you think it is. Most people treat it like a fuel that can last, but it never does. You feel it after a video or quote, and suddenly you believe everything will change. For a short time, you move faster, think clearer, and feel in control. But then it disappears without any clear reason. One day you are driven. The next day you are stuck in the same habits. Nothing outside breaks, yet your effort breaks first. This is where most people misunderstand the problem. They assume motivation is supposed to stay. The truth is more uncomfortable, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The real question begins here. Motivation isn't a system you can rely on. It's only a spike in your mind. It behaves closer to emotion than discipline, rising fast and falling just as quickly. When you watch something inspiring or read something powerful, your brain releases short bursts of dopamine. That chemical reaction creates a false sense of long-term drive, like something has truly changed inside you. But nothing is stored in a stable form. There is no lasting structure behind that feeling. So the motivated version of you is temporary by design, not by mistake. As you repeat the same trigger, the brain stops responding the same way. What once felt intense becomes normal, then routine, then ignored. This is where most people misread everything. They think they've lost motivation, but it was never stable to begin with. It was only novelty, and when novelty fades, effort suddenly feels heavier than it should. That's the first silent failure point at this stage. People shift their strategy and try to replace motivation with willpower. It sounds like a stronger approach, but it is still fragile. Willpower is not an endless source of control. It drains with every decision you make, every moment you delay action, and every small resistance you tolerate. So when motivation disappears, willpower is left to carry the full load alone. That is exactly where consistency starts to collapse. Not because the goal is wrong, but because the system was never built to support it. Most people depend on emotional energy instead of structural design. They wait for a feeling of readiness before they act, as if readiness is required. But in reality, action is what creates readiness. Without momentum, even basic tasks start to feel expensive in your mind. Slowly, the brain begins to negotiate, looking for excuses that feel logical enough to accept, until eventually, quitting feels like the easiest option. That is not failure. It is predictable depletion. The deeper issue is never motivation or willpower in the first place. It is something more silent but far more powerful: environment friction and identity conflict. Your surroundings are not designed to support the version of you are trying to become. Every attempt to change is met with resistance from your default setting, like the system is pulling you back without asking. At the same time, your identity is not fully shifted yet. You are trying to act like a new person while still thinking like the old one. That mismatch creates a hidden fatigue that builds faster than effort itself. You don't feel it immediately, but it accumulates in the background. Eventually, the brain stops choosing ambition and starts choosing efficiency. It pulls you back into familiar patterns because they require less energy and less conflict. That is why progress never feels stable for most people. Real consistency never comes from emotional peaks or sudden bursts of energy. It comes from systems that keep working even when nothing feels interesting or rewarding. Small actions, repeated without negotiation, slowly reshape identity over time. Not intensity, but repetition is what actually compounds results. When action becomes a default response, motivation is no longer needed to start. It stops being a requirement and becomes a bonus that sometimes appears, not something you depend on. The real shift is simple but uncomfortable. Stop chasing motivation and start designing behavior that runs without it. Because what you repeat quietly, without attention or emotion,
is what eventually defines you permanently.